All right, let's talk about leadership in the church. This is a topic that's affects a lot of people because when we're going to look at what the Bible says about certain things, there's going to be a lot of churches that don't seem to do that. But let's start by looking at what people said. Now, if you just look at the umbrella of Christianity in general, well, what happens, right? What do you actually do in this church? Well, you usually gather together in some kind of building, maybe somebody's house, right? We have these activities of worship, right? And there's usually one person in that church who is leading the group of believers in this process on a Sunday or sometimes a Saturday. Now, if you're Catholic, it's one person. It's going to be somebody you call a priest, right? If you're not Catholic, this one person, if there's one person, you're probably going to call this guy a pastor. I got priests and pastors. And these are guys that have dedicated their lives to serving God, to serving that church. That's the common pattern that we have. And so we have to ask the question, where do these positions of leadership come from, right? Because they got to come from our source of authority that we've set up. When you have to ask the question, does the Bible teach that there are priests and pastors? Well, we're going to take a look. Now, in the Old Testament, there was this priesthood of special people, right, serving God and the people. And they had certain things in the temple that they had to do, right? And other people would come. There'd be something that they could do, but at some point the priest has to do certain things. Like there's places he can go, the other people can't go. Certain parts of a sacrifice that he has to do. Right, so he's there between God and man. And there was also a high priest kind of between all the other priests and God. Had the guy there. And there was a Holy of Holies he went into like once a year. Right, only he could go. Sometimes. Now in the New Testament, so that happens. So people look at the New Testament and you look at the Old Testament and it's like maybe there should still be a guy like that in the New Testament, in our relationship with God. I got this from a Catholic encyclopedia. It's downstairs. It's also on the internet. It's a free thing. Because I was curious what they would say about it. But, well, I'll just start by reading what it says here. The historical origin of the episcopate, which is all translated bishop sometimes, there's a big controversy here. There are very diverse hypotheses, ideas have been proposed to explain the text of the inspired writings, the apostolic fathers relating to early positions, right? So I read this, and you kind of look at it. We know we started here, and we're here now. Now, how did we get from here to here? It's unclear. Right? We got a few ideas. Catholic writers agree in recognizing that bishop, episcopate guy comes from the apostles, but are much divided as to the meaning of the terms which designate these positions. In the New Testament, these positions in the New Testament and also like the early Christian writers. One may even ask if these terms were two different things, right? Or three different things. Or is it all talking about the same thing? So, but to some extent, in the early period of the New Testament, we got the word bishop and, priest. We got episkopos and presbyteros. That's the Greek words that they had. And if you go back far enough, everybody starts saying it looks like those words are the same. Let's look at some of these words. We have a Greek word. The New Testament is in Greek. The word is presbyteros. Literally, if you were to translate the word, it means old, right? It's going to be an older person. But there's also like a position of a presbyteros, right? So sounds like some older guy looking for the church. And I found this out recently. Hundreds of years later, we got some guys in England who speak English, and they're trying to say this Greek word presbyteros, and it comes out like praost or something. So that's where this word comes from. Again, if we follow the transition from what we started with to what we have now in the Catholic Church, the requirements for a presbyter changed over time. So at some point they started saying, if you're going to be this guy, you can't be married, right? And some other things, but that's the main thing that people think about. And over time, we get these other positions. You have these bishops that are over an area, over a region. You get archbishops, cardinals, and the Pope eventually, right there on the top. These were developed over time. This is just history, right? And that's kind of how it continues on today. Now, there might be other positions. I don't know what all the intricacies are of the positions, but those are kind of the highlights. And then we're going to jump ahead a little bit. Again, I talked about Martin Luther last time. He kind of got upset with the Catholic Church for some corruption that was in it, right? And he tried to fix it. He kind of gave up at some point and made his own church. And because he started this thing, other people started coming out of Catholicism and making their own churches. So as it turns out, the Protestant Reformation was by ex-Catholics. And most of these guys, they didn't think like it was just completely wrong, right? They said in their minds of a lot of these people, Catholicism is basically correct. There's some things that need to be changed. And that's what they were trying to do. Right. So there's over time, what happens is we get these guys called pastors. As far as I know, there's nobody in the Catholic Church called a pastor. I don't know. But they started appointing pastors. They didn't have priests that they were appointing. They were appointing pastors. Right. And now we get today what we have is we have a lot of churches that have one pastor there. They're not even appointed by somebody. They were hired. It was more like they were hired for a job. And so the main difference between these people, other than like one can be married and one can't, the functional difference is that the Catholic priest has a sacrifice of the Mass and some other things like penance, and the Protestants don't do these things. Sometimes they still have what they call sacraments. But they don't do the sacrifice of the Mass. They don't have penance, right? And when you put those things, when you line it up like that, these positions are very similar. The pastor and the priest are leaders of their churches, the one leader of their churches. They have members underneath them that they're assigned to, that they're responsible for. Okay. So it's established, I think everybody agrees to this, that this priest thing, this priest-bishop thing, and all these positions kind of evolved over time according to the situation that people were in. Right? They saw what was happening and said, I think we need to adjust things a little bit. And even the pastor, like you might still have in your notes something about John Calvin, but I couldn't find anything in there about being one pastor. So it seems like that idea is kind of developed also. And when you look at a priest in Catholicism, it's a lot like the priest in the Old Testament, right? The priest in the Old Testament would go into the Holy of Holies, right? And they would make sacrifices. The Catholic priest, there's also a Holy of Holies there. They have a real sacrifice, right? So there's a lot of parallels there. And we got other guys, and at the top is a special priest or special bishop, head bishop, that's moved up in authority, right, to the highest position. Now, here's what I present to you. What we normally think of as a pastor, a priest, or a pope, it's very difficult to find these things in the Bible. We're going to see what we actually have. Well, we're going to start with the idea of an upside-down pyramid, right? Because in the world, it's just like, for example, the corporate world. You work your way to the top, and you're the most powerful person in the company, right? You call the shots. And a lot of churches are like that, right? The people that are in charge, they tell everybody else what they need to do. Let's look at something that Jesus says. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him, Jesus, with her sons, and kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Command that these 2 sons of mine may sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" They said, "We are able." We find out later that they're not able, by the way. He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared for by my Father." I misspoke, a similar cup. And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant, that means angry, at the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, here's the point we're getting to. "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them." They love to use their authority, right, and their power, and to gain positions of power. He said, "It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So, you look at what Jesus says there, and when you become great, and becoming great in the kingdom often gives you less power, right? It just gives you more responsibility, more things you got to take care of. So again, often in the world, let's just say the corporate world, or government or something, people are always trying to work to the high positions of authority and power, right? So they can tell everybody what to do, they can make the decisions. But a follower of Christ that wants to be great, right? He's going to start off here on this path of being a servant, and at the beginning he's not going to be very good at it. But as time goes on, if he keeps on doing what's right, he's going to become more and more of a servant to other people, moving down the pyramid, right? The greatest will be your servant. This is the attitude. We're starting with the attitude of a leader before we're getting to the actual leaders, right? The attitude of a leader of God is not everybody has to do what I say. The attitude of a leader is, I'm here to help you, right? So you can just evaluate this yourself. You look at different churches and you have to ask yourself, is that what's going on in these different churches, right? Is that the feeling you get that the people in charge there are helping you, or they want to control you, right? Which one is it? Here we go. We're getting into the positions. This one is the like episcopate, bishop. Episkopos is the Greek word. And again, Timothy is a guy here. He's the guy that's going to appoint these guys. Paul and Timothy were there in this place, and he says to Timothy, I'm going to leave you here, and you're going to appoint these guys. Right? So Timothy is never described as a bishop or any of these other things. The closest we can get is that it says he's doing the work of an evangelist. So it seems like he's this guy in a temporary position. All right, these are the instructions to Timothy on how to choose these guys. This saying is sure. If anyone aspires to the office of bishop, he desires a noble task. Now, a bishop must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, sensible, dignified, hospitable, an apt teacher, no drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, and no lover of money. He must manage his own household well, keeping his children submissive and respectful in every way. For if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, or he may fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. All right, so a few key things here. All right. Now, the idea that this guy shouldn't be married there's something else that Paul says in a different letter, talking to people, and says he says, I kind of prefer not to be married. That's my suggestion to you. It might be better not to be married. It's either because that's what his recommendation, or because of the situation they're in. But this same person says this about the bishop, very interesting, right? This bishop guy has to be married. That's one of the things on the list. And that's also going to be something you're going to look at. They're going to look at the family that this guy has, right? He must manage his own household well, because if he can't do that, he can't manage the household of God. This is his resume, right? And a teacher, that makes sense. All this other stuff makes sense because it basically just says he needs to be a good guy, right? He needs to be known as a good guy. And I forgot about this one until I reviewed it. In verse 6, it says he can't be a new Christian, right? Because that's kind of dangerous. It's like you just became a Christian and now I'm a leader of the church, right? That can give somebody a big head, right? So be careful with that, with new people. We go to Titus, a guy that's in a similar position, right? Paul writes to. He said, this is why I left you in Crete, that you might amend what was defective and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. If any man is blameless, the husband of one wife, and his children are faithful and not open to the charge of being insubordinate. I don't know what the other word means. Insubordinate. For a bishop, as God's steward, must be blameless. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain, but hospitable, a lover of goodness, master of himself, upright, holy, and self-controlled. He must hold firm to the sure word as taught, so that he may be able to give instruction in sound doctrine, which is a fancy word for teaching, and also to teach against those who contradict it. All right. I want you to notice here also, we got bishop, episkopos, we got episcopate, sometimes it's translated. We also got this thing up here. This is the presbyteros up here. This is the presbyter guy. We're not talking about two different guys here. And if you think about it, it would make sense that this would have to be an older guy if he's going to be married and have children, and we can make a judgment call on what kind of people his children are. Right? That is going to be an older person. Got elders and bishops, sounds like it's the same guy. We got a lot of the same things here. Again, it says it has to be married, right? Only one wife, with children, with good children. And he needs to be able to teach, because one of the big responsibilities of this guy is to teach. He needs to be able to do that. This is also interesting. We go to Acts 20, and Paul talks to a bunch of these leader guys. He said, from Miletus, he sent to Ephesus and called to him the elders of the church. All right, he's going to talk to the elders of the church in this place. And we skip down to verse 28. He's talking to these guys. It says, be on guard for yourselves, for all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has made you bishops, to pastor the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. Right? So we have the same group of guys, same group of leaders. They're elders, they're bishops, they're pastors. This is all the same group of people. Right? It usually doesn't say pastor in the translation, it says shepherd. That's because pastor is the Latin word for shepherd. Right? That's just the same thing. Okay, I'm going to put them all up on the screen here. We've got these three guys that all sound like they're the same guy. We've got the shepherd, which is what pastor means, right? So, who's that? That's a guy who's going to care for sheep. This guy is going to care for the metaphorical sheep in Jesus' church. We have the bishop, episcop. These are the borrowed words. These are the Greek words that are borrowed into English. Somebody in English trying to say it. If you translate the word, it means something like overseer or guardian, right? Which means this is going to be a person that's going to take responsibility and protect somebody or something. And we get the presbyter here. Here's a presbyter, which again means an older guy, or an elder, as you might say. An older person, because in all practicality, to meet the requirements, you're going to be an older person. This is also a priest, right? But again, when you look at the New Testament and you see priests, this is not what we normally think of as a priest, right? We think of the guy that's going to do the sacrifices. That's what we normally think of as a priest. And if you look at the New Testament, what Peter says, he says, we are all being built up into a royal priesthood. Right? If you're a Christian, you're a priest, right? And you can reach the Father through the high priest, Jesus. Right? This is the symbolism that we get. So these are not three different positions, right? As some people want to say. These are three different descriptions of the same guy. I don't know if I would even call them titles, right? Like we want to capitalize these things as a position. It's just, these are more like descriptions. This is an interesting little thing. A more, let's say, accurate translation of one of these words. And this word is proistemi. It's a Greek word. Pro means in front. Histemi means stand. So this word means to stand in front of, literally. And that's what's used in 1 Timothy 3:5, right? If a man does not know how to proistemi for his own family, how can he care for God's church, right? If he doesn't know how to stand, I imagine like a guy standing here, like in front of his family. If he doesn't know how to stand in front of his family, how can he stand in front of God's church? I imagine a guy kind of protecting the family from things that'll hurt them, and protecting a church from things that'll hurt them. Okay, so regardless of how you look at it, leaders in the church are servant leaders, right? They don't have a lot of power. And if you look at what they're supposed to do, it looks like they're just supposed to be leading by example. They're supposed to be teaching and leading by example. You don't have anything in the Bible about special powers in the church to decide what people do, right? That anybody else wouldn't have. So you become a leader, you just get more responsibility, really. That's like an upside down pyramid. That's not how I usually think about leadership, right? It's this way. Did you see anything in there about, this guy needs to have a degree or anything like that? I saw something later on by John Calvin. It said, if we pick these pastor guys, they need to go to school to learn the Bible and all these things. It doesn't say anything like that, right? It just says they need to be able to teach correctly. And there's more than one way to achieve that. And if you follow the requirements that are set down here for these guys, they have life experience. If you're a married guy with kids, you've got experience as a single guy, as a dating guy, a married guy, and a guy trying to solve problems between kids fighting. Right? These are the kind of skills that you need in God's church. And so if you go to a church and it feels like it's a business, maybe that's because it's being run like a business and not like a family like it should be. Okay. Leading by example. The leaders are putting themselves in front, right? Somebody comes with some new teaching in there. It's like, I'm going to stand in front of that. Like, I'm going to teach against that, right? Let me tell you what the Bible really says. And that's all we have for today. Tomorrow we'll be coming back to Holy Spirit stuff.